Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Caitlin Long. I work here at the Staley School of Leadership Studies. It's a pleasure to have all of you here for our What Matters to Me and Why speaker series here today. And welcome to those of you who are joining us on Zoom. We're glad you're here in this hybrid world that we all now live in. So for those of you who are on Zoom, just a reminder, please mute your mics. We'll be using slides throughout, so you might find it easiest to use the speaker view on Zoom. And you're welcome to leave your camera on or off. We're not seeing you here on the big screen, so no worries there. Chat will be on for greetings during the presentation and also on for the Q&A at the end. So what matters to me and why is sponsored by the Staley School of Leadership Studies and supported by a cross-campus planning committee. If anyone here is on the campus planning committee, would you just give a quick wave or shout out? Yes, thank you. Thanks for your work. Appreciate it. And it's really designed and built to strengthen bonds between people who teach and learn and work together daily and foster understanding of how each of us embraces our values and K-State's principles of community. So we all have stories to share that reflect our values, our life experiences, lessons learned. Telling our individual and collective stories is a way to share the values that define us. Our stories represent choice points, moments when we faced a challenge, made a choice, experienced an outcome, and learned something. As we tell and listen to each other's stories of what matters most, we build and strengthen our community. So whether you tell that story from a podium, like Linda will be doing today, or share it in a quiet moment with a close friend or a colleague, we all have the opportunity to speak about what matters most to us and listen and hear about what matters most to others. So today we have a wonderful speaker. Thank you to Linda for modeling vulnerability and storytelling as we strengthen K-State's campus. So I'd like to invite Maddie Michaelis up to introduce our speaker today. And as she comes up to the podium, also want to remind everyone, we all are aware of the campus mask policies and COVID policies. So I'll be following those today. And we've also invited our speaker to remove her mask as she's sharing her story, as she'll be staying 6 feet apart from all of us. So thank you for that. Maddie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline Michaelis. I am currently a junior at Kansas State, and I am majoring in family and consumer sciences education. I have had the wonderful opportunity to work alongside Linda for the past few months. She has created a welcoming, positive, and dedicated work environment, and this is due to the leadership qualities and joyful personality that Linda displays. Linda Craghead, an alum of Kansas State University, joined the facilities team in 2019, and she is currently serving as the Director of Facility Services. Linda provides leadership to custodial services, landscape services, and the recycling services. After her multi-state career with the ag industry giant Cargill, Linda returned to her home state where she focused her efforts on economic development of the Flint Hills region of Kansas. Selected to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism in 2011 and as Interim Agency Secretary in 2018, her passion for travel, people, nature, outdoor adventure in her home state served as a catalyst for innovative community partnerships and ongoing economic growth. A proud mother of 3 sons, Linda and her husband Galen live in the Flint Hills of Kansas near Alma. This is a quote directly from Linda, and it perfectly sums up her dedication and love for Kansas State University and the people she works with. I am blessed to work with amazing people who are passionate about the mission of this university. Since day one, my focus has been to create a positive culture that allows our team to excel in their ability to provide top-notch service to the students, faculty, and staff, and visitors of Kansas State. So it is my honor to present to you Linda Craghead.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Maddie. And thank you, Committee Dean DeNoble. And I have to give a special shout out to Mark Hansard, who's sitting up here, raised his hand a little bit earlier, because he, when I was asked to do this, I wasn't sure I was going to, quite honestly. And Mark gave me a deep dive and he said, he was my cheerleader. And he said, Linda, you can do it. So with that being said, for those people that know me, there's several of you in the room that do, you know that I can talk about anything. Just myself is a little awkward. So bear with me with that in mind. But, you know, when we start talking about people, we have to really start talking about the road. And when we think about that, I think about, you know, if I had to go back all over again, would I have actually seen myself on the road that I've been on? And think about yourself. I mean, when you're looking at, God, you know, did I predict all these moves and turns and twists and detours? And I think all of us would say probably not. But at the same time, what we can say is that with, and I guess let me move up a screen. Hang on, just a sec. With that, you know, life as a whole is just a really long and winding road. And what we find is that in all honesty, the most scenic roads in life are probably the detours we didn't even tend to want to make. And so with that being said, we got to start at the beginning. This is me. I'm number 6 of 7, so you can kind of figure that out. The little girl sitting on dad's lap. But we had a family of 7. I came from my dad, actually. His dad had a heart attack at an early age. And so his last year of school was his freshman year. My mom did graduate from high school, but she went on to be a waitress. And so my dad then went on to World War II, came back, and they began having kids. They had 7 of us. You know, they went through, my oldest brother, Gary, was actually served as the U.S. representative to the World Health Organization. My oldest sister, Sheila, was actually Secret Service, top secret clearance for the military, and taught people how to fly unmanned drones. Barb is a nurse. My sister Sue was actually, she worked as an accountant. My brother Bob is one of the best mechanics you could ever find. My little brother John serves as the athletic director for Circle High School. So, you know, when we look back at life and we think about that, it's really about those people that set the foundation for us. It was tough. You know, when I was growing up, there was, you know, you think about the recession that we might be in at this point in time. Back in the 80s, there was actually what they called a double dip recession. And if you remember that, for those that survived or were there and actually survived, what you found is that there were double-digit inflation rates. There were also double-digit interest rates. And so with respect to that, a lot of things happened. One of those is it was just tough on the farm. You know, you had a family farm that supported 7 kids. And if you look at the size of the farms right now, not anything compared to that. So long story short, as I grew up in this little tiny town of Danville, Kansas, anybody know where that's at? It's a major metropolis consisting of about 100 beings, counting the cats and dogs. Okay, so it's outside, and I grew up outside of town there. But you know, I couldn't wait to be from there. Has anybody ever felt that way? You know, you just kind of think, this is a great place to, it might have been a great place to grow up, but I didn't want to stay there. So I wanted to get away, and I went to K-State. And I was, you know, I graduated at the top of my class. Everything was going great. I just was ready to conquer the world, and I was going to be a vet. I was going to be a veterinarian. So I get to K-State, and I happened to be selected to be on the drum line for the marching band. And as my freshman year, we practiced a lot. And at the end of drum practice, guess what we did? Headed to Aggieville. So, you know, here's this person that comes out of high school. She's a valedictorian of her senior class. She gets here to K-State. She's having a lot of fun in the marching band. It happened to be the first time K-State ever went to a bowl game. So I'm not going to give you time to calculate that. But, you know, so I majored in Aggieville. And so I came out, you know, as valedictorian in my senior class, came into my first semester at K-State with a 1.99 GPA. Woo! You know, that was made everybody proud. Well, you know, I was really, you know, I realized then it was a real slap in the face that, hey, Linda, you're not as smart as you thought you were, number one. And I needed to get my act together. And so, you know, Jimmy Valvano has a great line. If you've ever seen any of his speeches, but he was a coach at North Carolina State, and it was, don't give up, don't ever give up. So eventually, I had to work full time while I was going to school after that first year that just kind of got me in dire straits. And when I was working, it was one of those things that I was tired. I get to my junior year, it was time to apply for vet school. You know, I got my grades back to where they needed to be. For the most part, I would have been borderline whether or not I made it into vet school. But in all honesty, I just didn't want to go to school anymore. I was done. So then it was like, okay, crap, now what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I really don't have a plan. I'm getting my degree in animal science, I think. You know, maybe it's agriculture, I'm not really sure. And so that's where I had a mentor. And it happened to be an instructor, and his name was Dale Allen. And he said, Linda, it's easy. He said, there's some great companies that are out there. He said, one of the companies you really need to think about is XL Beef. XL Beef, later called Cargill Meats, interviewed on campus. I was over in Holtall, and I got a job. I was pretty excited, and I got an interview to go down to Wichita. And the interview team in Wichita was supposed to have been made up of the vice president of sales, because that's kind of what I wanted to do, and a lot of other people. Lanny Binger, the vice president of sales, wasn't available. And so I got a guy by the name of Bob Mellinger, and he was the vice president of human resources. So at the end of the interview day, multiple interviews, he says, he calls me back in, he said, Linda, what do you want to do? Do you want to do sales? Or do you want to do human resources? Like, oh crap, I don't know. You know, whatever you think I'm best at, you know, just give me a job, please. And so lo and behold, he did actually offer me a job working with the most difficult animal in the world, people. Boy, I had no idea. I'd taken all these animal behavior courses, but when you start dealing with the most difficult animal, things get a little interesting. Lo and behold, I did graduate. I started my career with Cargill, and I did one more thing. Along the way, I fell in love. You know, and that kind of screws everything up. Not really, he was a pretty good guy. So anyway, I started my job down in Wichita with Cargill. And I was on 29th Street, was doing some fun things and learning all sorts of different things about HR and what that role entails. And then Bob Mellinger said, hey, Linda, do you mind? We got this special project. Could you spend a little time in Missouri? Not a problem. Could you spend a little time in Nebraska? Not a problem. Coming back and forth. Galen moves down to the Wichita area with me, not with me, but you know, in the same neighborhood. And he, you know, he's like, I'm there, and he's there, and I'm gone. Well, I come back one time, and he proposed, and I was just like, oh, this is really pretty awesome. But it's really the second time he proposed. I turned him down the first time. We won't go into the reasons there. But so he proposed, and I said yes. And I go back to work the next day, and I get a call from Bob Mellinger, and I'm all excited. I think he's going to congratulate me. We're going to the one of the top steakhouses in Wichita, and he says, "Hey, Linda," he said, "I'm like, I'm waiting for it. Yeah, congratulations." He's like, "So we got a deal. I need you to move to Illinois." Did you notice? I got engaged last night. He's like, so what are you telling me? Are you going to go, or are you not going to go? I really need you to go to Beardstown, Illinois. We bought a pork plant from Hormel, and he wanted me there for a startup. And a startup operation, if anybody's been in the business, you don't get to do that very often. And so it was really cool to have the opportunity to go, but I had to tell Galen. Lo and behold, make a long story short, I moved to Beardstown, Illinois. Galen is a licensed clinical social worker. And so as a social worker, his business can go just about anywhere we go, which was really, really awesome. And that he was willing. And back then, that wasn't usual. That was very atypical. And so, of course, it was just like, oh, we got to show your mom. It didn't go so well. My mom was like, yeah, keep going, Linda, keep going. So the really cool thing is that Cargill gave me lots of opportunities. I worked in Missouri, I worked in Nebraska, I worked in Illinois, then I went to Ottumwa, Iowa. And by the way, if anybody's ever been to Ottumwa, Iowa, they do not have a statue of Radar O'Reilly. I couldn't believe it. I went into every bar in town and they didn't have one. And so with respect to that, I went to Ottumwa, I went back to Beardstown, Illinois, and then I get my big break. I'm offered 2 jobs that advanced me into a human resource manager position. I'm really excited about that. One of them was in Kansas. One of them was in Arkansas. And if you remember, I wanted to leave Danville. Going back to Kansas, forget it. You know, Kansas didn't have anything for me to offer me. Really didn't want to go back to Kansas. And so, of course, we took the job down in Arkansas. So I went from the beef industry to the pork industry, then to the turkey industry, and eventually to the chicken industry. So while we were in Arkansas, we did have our first child. And we were really excited. Logan came about. I did apply and was accepted to law school, opted not to go because Levi, our second one, came in. He was born a week before law school started, and they would not postpone it for me for a year. So anyway, everything happens for a reason. But while I'm with Cargill as an HR manager, we do this thing. And a lot of you guys have taken the Myers-Briggs test. A lot of you guys have done the strengths test. We did a 360 assessment, 360 assessment. 360 assessment is the people that work on your team, it's the people you work with, and it's the people that are your managers. Well, it was all the executive team, which included the president of the meat operations, which was at the time an individual that I won't name, very, very demanding, totally focused on the finances, totally focused on the numbers, totally focused on the efficiencies, demanding numbers. And, we were all kind of like, he's pretty demanding. Well, we do this 360 assessment, and guess what? I got the very same score he did. And I'm like, this has got to be wrong. Something's totally wrong here because that is not me. That is not me. You guys know me. I'm just easy going, cheerleader, rah, rah, rah. Well, obviously back then, people didn't perceive me that way at all. And I realized it was a real kind of punch in the gut because that is not who I wanted to be. I was like, this has got to be wrong. But in the end, you guys know how those assessments work. They're pretty darn accurate. So I go home, my sister comes, she was in Amsterdam at the time. She comes over to see the new baby. And I am so excited. I'm talking about this new job that I have and as an HR manager and the things I'm doing and the things I'm accomplishing and the people that work for me. And she's like, slaps her hand down on the table. She says, stop it. Like what? Stop what? She said, stop talking like that. They're not your employees. They're Cargill's employees. I'm like, yeah, but they work for me. No, they don't. They don't work for you, Linda. And by the way, all these things that you're accomplishing, you're not doing any of them. It's the people that work on your team. So not only had I gotten a punch in the gut, I got a slap in the face from my own sister. And I was like, gee, mini Christmas, come on. I got, give me a little bit of credit. Give me a little bit of credit. No. Well, honestly, I started doing a little soul searching. I thought obviously I don't see myself the way other people see myself. So I really got to do a hard look in the mirror and think about who do I really want to be? What do I really want to be when I grow up? I'm still sometimes trying to figure that out. But really, for the most part, who do I really want to be when I grow up? So after Arkansas and after all of that, I really started doing a lot of things. I started reading a lot of books about personalities, about management styles, about leadership styles, all those types of things. And I just wanted to be better. I knew that I wasn't good at it. But long story short, Cargill decided maybe I needed a little refining around the edges. Takes me to the corporate office. At that time the meat sector was in Memphis. I go to Memphis. Within a couple months, we were having major labor issues down in Georgia. And they're like, Galen, and guess what? He just got moved, 2 kids, just got moved to Memphis with me. And every Monday morning I was flying to Georgia. Every Friday night I was flying back. And so and totally disrupted his schedule. It's like, Linda, can you just stay down there? But I got down there and I'm thinking, this is really, really going to be cool because everybody in South Georgia, if you haven't been there, everybody has a slow Southern drawl, right? Not. I get there and I find out that the reason I walk up and I'm in the HR office and somebody comes in and they start talking to me and it's so fast, I can't understand a darn word of what that person just said. I said, Can you slow it down just a little bit? Okay, so about the 9th time of slowing it down, I finally understood what the person was asking me. And it was really obvious to me, it was a communication issue. People didn't understand each other. And that was, a whole driving factor behind it. And it was a really interesting time for me because it was a culture that I thought I had this vision in my head of what this culture was going to be. The culture was totally different than what I ever would have thought. And so I go in, I'm thinking, I got to get to know each other. You guys know that work on my team. I like to get to know you as a person. By the way, I have changed since back then. And so I go into orientation and I think, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to get acquainted with the people that are coming on board. Have a team that could do the orientation, but I just really wanted to do that. So I go into orientation, I sit down talking about benefits, health insurance benefits. At the time, Excel had super health insurance benefits. And I sit down I go through this with them. And I said, okay, everybody, your children are covered on your insurance plan automatically. And your wife, if you have one. But even if you're not married, your children are covered on your insurance. And this guy kind of, like, you just need to turn the card over and write them all down. And he's like looking at me. He said, can you come over here? I said, yeah, what? He couldn't read. He couldn't write. He was 29 years old and he had 14 kids to put on that list. Totally, totally different culture. And that wasn't the only one. I mean, it was just not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It was just different than what I'd ever been exposed to in my entire life. It was not what I expected. You think of South Georgia, you think about Southern hospitality, and you think about other, and it's beautiful and there's beautiful people, really are, but it's totally different than here. Totally different than here. I did also learn one thing. I was sitting down in labor relations with the business agent for the UFCW. And believe it or not, the restaurant ran out of sweet tea. And we're in South Georgia, right? And I'm thinking, oh, that's easy. She just refilled my glass. Why don't you just get a glass of tea and put sugar in it? Oh my God. He's like, this is done. This meeting is totally over with because you obviously don't understand how we do things down here. And so he explained to me that you had to heat the tea up and then pour about 5 pounds of sugar into a gallon of tea and wait and let it dissolve and then you serve it. So I did. I learned something kind of new that day. But I also, it was just, throughout that entire experience, it resonated that we were raising our kids in a culture that was totally different and totally really foreign to what I had grown up in. And again, was it right? Was it wrong? It was just different. Well, long story short, Cargill decided to get out of the chicken business. I was in the chicken business at the time, decided to get out of the chicken business and trade their operations for some pork operations. And they wanted to know, they gave me an opportunity. I flew to Minneapolis, had the opportunity to interview for 5 different jobs. And the ones I wanted involved a lot of travel. I had 2 kids at home and I was pregnant with my 3rd. It's like, no, that's not going to work. And the other ones were desk jobs. And if anybody knows me, I'm not a desk job kind of person. So we actually, my husband, who is a licensed clinical social worker, had the opportunity to start a business. He was working with the education system down there, just like the scenario I talked about. There was a lot of socioeconomic issues with children. When you walked into a public school down there, even in the elementary, even back then, we actually had to walk through metal detectors. It was a small town. It wasn't really big, probably smaller than the size of Manhattan. And so, believe it or not, Galen was really busy. So we decided that I would leave Cargill, and that was a really tough thing for me to do because I really liked what I did. And it was, kind of getting outside of my comfort box. So we quit. I quit and went to work with Galen. And through that process, over a period of time, we went from Galen to actually 13 facilities across Georgia, 175 employees, and 2 separate business adventures, all about serving kids who were severely emotionally disturbed in the state of Kansas, in the state of Georgia. And it was really very rewarding. One of the things we talked about, and one of the things that the philosophies that we used was the circle of courage. What we found in a lot of cases with kids is that there was a piece missing. Maybe they didn't feel like they belonged. Maybe they didn't feel that they could master any type of skill. Maybe they felt totally out of control, that they had no ability to control their outcome. They didn't have that independence. They didn't know how to be generous because they had never had. And so everything they got, they wanted back. Well, at that point in time, we had several employees, and it was just like, it was an aha moment for me. Because it's not just severely emotionally disturbed kids that have that issue. We have that issue. Adults have that issue. And, we have a responsibility. What we assumed a responsibility to help kids, we also had a responsibility to help each other. And we had an even bigger responsibility to help ourselves. So after a period of time, quite a period of time, there was a lot of things that happened. My dad died suddenly. My mom had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And Galen took our neighbor guys hunting to Western Kansas. Anybody hunt birds? Hunts birds. He went out to go hunting in Western Kansas. They flew into Kansas City and drove across to Jetmore, Kansas. And it was interesting because they came back, and John, our neighbor, he's like, oh my God, people in Kansas are so friendly. They are just super cool. It's like, yeah, how can I help you? We go in a convenience store, here it's kind of sketchy sometimes. He's like, walking into the convenience store, and the store clerk's just like talking to me like he knew me. And it was just like, well, that's Kansas values. That's what Kansas people do. All those things that we thought was Southern hospitality that took place in South Georgia, it actually was better in Kansas. One thing I'll mention throughout this time frame that I was moving around, we never really knew how long we were going to be anywhere. So what we realized is that we better hurry up and check it all out while we were there. We wanted to see the sites. We saw all the Lincoln stuff in Illinois. We saw, lived in Memphis, went down to Beale Street multiple times. Never did see Elvis's place, but we went down to Beale Street several times to listen to the jazz. A lot of different things. And, every place we went, because I remember, if you recall, I talked about the fact that Kansas didn't have anything to offer. So of course, what was I doing? The whole time as we were traveling and seeing and doing, we were looking for it. And every time we moved, we were like, this is gonna be it. This is where we're gonna be. This is what we're gonna do. It's here. This is where we're gonna live. This is where we're gonna raise your family. This is what we're gonna do. And every time we went and checked it all out, we were kind of a little disappointed. I mean, it was pretty. Everything we saw, we have friends in all sorts of states across the United States and even beyond. We have, we've seen a lot of different things. We've traveled a lot. But like I said, I don't know if it was my dad's sudden death, if it was my mom's diagnosis, or if it was the fact that Galen came back here and thought, this is it. We need to be back home. So Galen comes home, we sit down and we have a long conversation. I mean, we had a lot going on. And we made a life choice. We had my oldest son, Logan, was getting ready to go to junior high. He was a 5th grader at the time. And Levi was 7 because we were the worst people in the world on June 8th, that upcoming year, because it was his 8th birthday and we moved back to Kansas. So yeah, oh my gosh, he didn't forgive us for a year. It was horrible. Anyway, so we made a life choice. We sit down and talk together, and that was really important to us. We, growing up, we both I thought he grew up in the Beaver Cleaver family. I already knew mine was dysfunctional. I mean, that's a story in and of itself. But we really worked hard as a team to try to raise our family in the best way we thought we could. We knew, for me, having kids was like the scariest thing I could ever even consider, because what if I screwed it up? And the nice thing is that, when we came back to Kansas, we realized all along the way, their success isn't up to just us. My oldest son will tell you that he was in football practice, and we had this football coach, and when he got to high school, and his football coach he was having his practices were going later and later and later, and he had his restricted license. We live way outside of town, and so he was driving himself to school and back because of practice, and it was pretty crazy. And I was like, Lori B, Logan, what's going on with practice? He's like, well, Mom, the coach. The next night I get a phone call from a friend of mine. Said, do you know Logan's dragging Main Street? I just saw him. I got, oh. So, you know, you give him enough rope, he'll hang himself. And sure enough, he didn't. So he didn't get to drive for a few weeks. But anyway, so when we came back, you know, Galen went into education. He now happens to serve as the president or the principal at the Alma Elementary and the Maple Hill Elementary, does a super job at it. And the kids, he's so good with the kids. We came back, he started actually out as a social worker in the school system. And I didn't know what I was gonna do. I really didn't. I had no idea. It's like I worked for Craghead, we had this business and it was just like, we made a life choice. That house that you see behind happens to be Galen's great-grandparents. His grandfather was born in it. His grandparents were living in it until his grandfather passed away. And then we took it over. So my job became renovating a house. You want me to wire a panel box? I'd be happy to do that for you. But Galen's done the most recent ones though. So while I'm doing all that and I'm learning about how to wire houses and do plumbing and all of that stuff, I'm also trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And who do I want to be and how do I want to act? What do I want to be when people look at me and think about me, who are they going to think about? So I started again, reading a whole lot of books. And I decided I'm going to get really involved in the community. I'm going to get really involved in Alma, Kansas, USA. I get on the school board, really focus on a lot of things there, get involved in economic development. And I happened to be, while I was heading out to the house one day, I stopped by the local think tank, the convenience store. And if you live in small town Kansas, you know all the local farmers and ranchers are at the convenience store solving all the world's problems. So I decided to sit down at the table with them and have some coffee. And they're like talking. And of course, the talk of the town is, you know, gosh dang, they want to raise the taxes again. The mill levy's going up. This is absolutely ridiculous. You know, gee, many Christmas. They don't need any more of my money. But did you know the dang highway department won't do anything about that bridge outside of town? I just got a new tractor. Can't get the bridge. I can't get my tractor through the bridge. You know, it's like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So I'm sitting there listening to these guys. And of course I wasn't from there. Although my husband's family was, so it made it a little bit easier. And I said, you know, well, it's easy. And he's like, what? I'm like, use other people's money. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, tourism. And they're like, the farmers look at me, ranchers look at me like, you are absolutely off your rocker. What have you been smoking out there? I don't know. But so I go out there and I'm talking to him and I'm like, seriously, you guys, the Flint Hills of Kansas are awesome. I mean, you look across we have the last stand of the tallgrass prairie, the last 3% of the tallgrass prairie left in the nation. We have all these authentic cowboys that are out gathering their cattle up on horseback because you can't get a four-wheeler across it. You're going to throw your nick out. You know, there's all sorts of things that people would really love to see here. And they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, no, serious. So one of the farmers, or one of the ranchers, I will say, he decided to put an ad in the New York Times. And he offered people the opportunity to come to his ranch and actually to help gather cattle on horseback and to spend the night doing some with them and do some fence building. He had calls coming galore. He had 40 people stay with him over the next 4 months because they wanted to do that. And he became the advocate. He's like, well, this can actually happen. This can actually work. And so it really became my passion to help people understand that Kansas has a lot to offer. Kansas has a lot going on. And how do we help people understand exactly what that is? Well, I had the opportunity to help write a grant for see that top thing on the screen up there. Has anybody in here been to the Symphony in the Flint Hills? I know, Casey, you can't raise your hand. If you haven't, I would highly encourage you to go. And I think Casey would even encourage you to go. I helped write the first grant for the Symphony in the Flint Hills. And really, it was a group of us people that recognized the relevance of the tallgrass prairie. And we wanted to help people understand. Because what we learned is that people really didn't know what it was. They didn't know why we were burning it. They didn't know why we were doing anything with it. And what's so important about it? Why don't you just let the trees grow up? So it became our mission to help people understand that. And I'm gonna take a step back. I also, when we were actually working with economic development and working on the school board and everything else, I talked about those books that we were reading. And I was reading. We also actually, and it kind of went about hand in hand with the Symphony of the Flint Hills. We decided to open up a little ice cream shop. Because see, by then my oldest son and my middle son were junior high and high school age. And number one, they needed a job. Number two, they needed to learn, and I wanted them to learn how to work with people. And so we actually started this ice cream shop up. And of course, when we're putting the ice cream shop together in town, all the other high school kids wanted to work at it because it's this ice cream shop. It's got tables, it's got umbrellas, it's this really cool place. Everybody wanted to work there. So Galen and I are like, oh crap, how do we choose? How do we choose? Well, remember I talked about all those books I was reading? We decided that we would assign homework. So we went and got a copy. We got 10 copies of the fish book. We got 10 copies of How Full Is Your Bucket? We got 10 copies of The Fred Factor, and I gave that out to somebody to read that I don't have a copy of it with me right now. Oops, I'm hitting buttons. Think about it. They have book reports that they had to do. They had to actually, if they had a real interest, they had to fill out that, they had to submit a book report. Whether or not I got the book back, it didn't matter because they're all really cool books. If you haven't read them, I'd encourage you to do that. And so we got that going. We got the Symphony in the Flint Hills going. And I was doing some consulting with the Symphony in the Flint Hills. And I got a call one day. I'd had the opportunity to be part of CARL, which is the Kansas Ag Rural Leadership Program. Later had a chance to be involved with Leadership Kansas and recently a leadership program here. And, I got this phone call and it was from this guy and he wanted to know if I knew of anybody that would be good as a secretary of Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Parks. And I didn't even know how to respond to the guy because I didn't know what to call him. Because at the time he was a US Senator, he had been the governor-elect. Why he called me, I don't have any idea. I don't know. That's probably, I asked Mark the same question when you asked me to do this. I don't know, but he did. And so we talked a little bit and I threw some names out there and I really had not been involved in politics at all, other than being on the school board and lobbying for a few things from that perspective. And so he called me, I had a question and he's asking these things and he said, at the end of the day, after I threw that out there, it's like, I don't think you understand what I'm asking. I obviously don't. I want to know if you'd be interested in being part of the team. Would you be interested in helping us transition tourism over to wildlife and parks and helping us promote Kansas as a great place to be? I said, can I think about it? Because I had been in corporate America for what seemed like forever, doing all these different things. And the thought of getting into the bureaucratic side of things, being on the school board was enough. Trying to consider doing anything like that, it was just like, there's just no way. So I go home that night and I sit down and all three of my boys, Logan, Levi, and Luke were all three there. And Galen, I said, you guys are never gonna believe what happened today. Got a phone call and this was a conversation. We're like, well, yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer, Mom, do it. Oh no, a bottle of wine later and visited with some friends. Eventually, 2 weeks later, I called them up and I said I would consider it. And so that began my adventure with Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. And it was an amazing thing. I worked with an amazing group of people there. The tourism team that promote the state of Kansas are absolutely dynamic. They have such a passion for Kansas. Worked with them, they were absolutely terrific. The state parks were in a really bad place financially and had not had a new park added since 2000. And I'm trying to think, I gotta look, cheat sheet here. 1992 was the last time there had been any new state parks added. And so worked with those two teams primarily and had the opportunity to actually start 2 new state parks. The one in the bottom that you'll see is Little Jerusalem Badlands. If you haven't been out there, I would highly encourage it. When I went there the very first time, I thought, I had no idea. I mean, I'd seen every corner of Kansas, the mine lands, the rickery breaks. I've been down this road that was 7 miles from this place repeatedly to go out to Lake Scott State Park, historic Lake Scott State Park. I had no idea this existed. This absolutely blows your mind, guys. So if you have a chance, go. Then I also had the opportunity to help develop something that it's the longest, one of the longest rail trails in the nation. That's the Flint Hills Trail, the Flint Hills Trail State Park. So if you have a chance to go explore any of those, I would highly encourage it. The other thing I had an opportunity to do is work with the Department of Interior to designate the Kansas River as a national water trail, the second in the nation. So it's pretty cool. So all those things I had an opportunity to do were just absolutely awesome. Loved every minute of it. My husband, on the other hand, would probably say she's traveling way too much. She's never here. So anyway, things go about. I had the opportunity to serve 2 terms. I worked for 8 years with the organization. Ended up having the opportunity. I had some great mentorship. I worked for the former Speaker of the House. He served as a secretary. He left. I had the opportunity to serve as the interim secretary. And then we had an election. And for those that are involved and have been involved in those things before, I think Ethan has and other people have, there's an opportunity for the governor to select their new team. Well, I knew her, not a big deal, and have the utmost respect for both sides. And what happens is that people get a letter and they say, thank you for your service, but you need to find something different. And I got through the first round. I was like, yes, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be able to stick around. This is awesome. And because I love what I do, I'm absolutely passionate about what I do. And I get to work on a Monday morning before inauguration. And on my desk is a letter that says, thank you for your service. Your time with the state of Kansas is over at noon tomorrow. Totally got caught flat-footed. I really did. I didn't see it coming. I should have. I look back on it now and it's just like, and the thing is, it's not personal. It's politics. It's just the way it is. But it was tough. It's tough for me to leave the crew. But what that did is brought me an opportunity. I didn't know what I was going to do. And Galen, again, bless his heart, he's a super great guy. He is going through LinkedIn and he's like, Linda, look, there's an opportunity at K-State. It's the director of custodial services. I'm like, okay, all right. Little did I know that I would get offered an opportunity to come interview. And some of those guys are sitting right here that had the opportunity to interview me, and thank you. And they actually took a chance on me. I knew nothing about industrial custodial services, nothing. I definitely didn't know anything about recycling services other than I knew when my kids' rooms weren't clean. And I knew I didn't like trash around. And so I was just like, but I like people. I've worked with people before. There's a lot of them on the team. Maybe they'll give me a chance. And lo and behold, Casey and Gary and Tim and Lolita, Heather, they were all on the team and gave me that opportunity. And so thank you. Oh, and again, all the custodial supervisors and the custodial managers at the time were also part of that selection committee. And I think they thought, oh my gosh, what am I getting into? This lady is, she's a handful. But it really gave me an opportunity to work with a terrific team. It gave me discount tickets at the football games, which was absolutely awesome. But it even gave me a better opportunity to work with a team of people that are absolutely dynamic. I talked about all those books that I asked the kids to read when they were at the ice cream shop. Well, guess what the first book was that team had to read? The fish book. You think about what the custodians do. They do a terrific job. They're voiced in recycling, landscape services. They make first impressions for this entire university. If they don't do their job well, we don't do our job well. So every single one, there's a lot of them in here, that these are the guys that really deserve the credit for how this university looks. They do a phenomenal job. They work their tails off. And I can tell you right now that they're working with a whole lot less people than they'd like to be working with. but I don't know that anybody has necessarily seen the difference. And that's because of these guys. That's because of these guys. So anyway, they gave me a chance. And all I really wanted to do was a chance to kind of instill what I had learned in the minds and the actions and managerial styles of others. And I told Casey back in the day, I said, if I ever, I was told one time that if I ever stopped getting frustrated, that it was time for me to go do something else. Because really what it's about is making the difference in the lives of people. What we do, every action that we take is going to impact somebody. If you read How Full Is My Bucket, the golden rule is not do unto others as you would do unto yourself. The golden rule really is do unto others the way they want you to do to them. Because see, every single one of us is different. Jacob's different than Kelly, that's different than Debbie, and that's different than Kim. Everybody's different. And if we try to treat people all the same way, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong. And like I said, with respect to this team of people that really matter are these guys. They're these guys. It's not all the facilities. That's as many as I could get it. Yeah, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, Charlotta, because they deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. They do a phenomenal job for this university. And sometimes it's sort of like KDOT. When the road conditions are really good, not a problem. As soon as you start seeing potholes come up, man, everybody's on your case. So it's, what we do is a lot like that. And so I think it's important to remember the people behind everything that happens here. The things that you don't see. Hopefully you don't see us. I mean, if you're not seeing us, that's probably a pretty darn good thing. But if you are calling me on a regular basis, then I know we got a problem that we got to address. But these guys are the faces that make things happen behind the scenes at K-State, and they are absolutely phenomenal. So if you can't tell, I'm passionate about two things so far. Passionate about the state of Kansas. I'm really passionate about K-State football, and this terrific team of people. And these guys. Oh, pretty special. So my oldest son, Logan, I've talked about a little bit. He is now, he has his master's from Arkansas State in sports management. Levi, the guy on this end, he is in his first year of residency in medical school as an internal medicine doctor, and actually took a year sabbatical and got his master's in public health from Harvard University. Luke is the Nixman, he's kind of in the middle there. He's our youngest. He is actually, he works for a medical research company. They've spent a lot of time working on things for COVID. So pretty excited there. And then there's Galen. So anyway, that's my story. We enjoy being here. We love working with the university. I love working with the university. Galen loves what he just does. And you can't ask for anything more than that. I'm not saying it hasn't always been easy. It hasn't. There's been some really rough roads along the way. And we talked about that road that's more scenic. All the detours cause life to be more scenic. Sometimes it's a pretty rough road. And I think the thing that's important is it's how we choose to respond to it and what we choose to do with it that makes a difference. And I think the thing that I always try to remember, no matter what I do, whether it's, and I know that I'm guilty of this. Sometimes Kelly comes in my office and I'm talking on the phone and I'm like looking over here, or I'm looking at my computer and Kelly's trying to talk to me. And as I know that's wrong. And I've given the team the permission, like, Linda, stop what you're doing and look at me, okay? But I think everybody has to remember that what we do, how we act, where we go, how we look at somebody makes a difference. And you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference. What you guys do makes a great difference. You just have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful. We are doing a little tag teaming today at the Staley School. My name is Andrea Luke, and if anybody has any questions, we have about 10 minutes of Linda's time. please, Kate in the back and Kim here have microphones for you to ask any questions of Linda that you might have.
Okay.
So Galen's a social worker.
Yes.
Where did he go to school?
He got his undergrad in Bethany in Nebraska, and he got his master's degree at University of Arkansas, Little Rock. And then went on and got his, finished all of his, did all the work behind the scenes to get licensed.
And you probably told us this, but what's he doing now?
He is a principal. He came back, he went back after he got his master's in social work. After we got back here, he went on and got his master's in education leadership and is now serving as the principal at Alma Elementary and Maple Hill Elementary. So yeah, so they've had their hands full as well over the last couple of years. But thank you for asking. He's a great guy. If you ever have a chance to get to meet him, I would encourage it. Yeah, Jim.
Let me bring you this for the folks on the.
So how did you meet your?
Oh, how did I meet my husband? No, I met him. I was not at Aggieville. Thank you very much. It happened to be at the Ranch Saloon. If anybody knows where the Ranch Saloon was, it was out on Highway 24. Tim knows. Tim knows. Yeah, he actually was with a friend who got dumped. And, huh? It was my senior year. Yep, it was my senior year. Last semester, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
I have a question from someone on Zoom.
Okay.
This is from Carrie Keller. Loved your story, Linda. You started out in what would have been a male-dominated workplace.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear how you were perceived, and maybe it was impacted by expectations about women. What advice do you have for young women starting their careers?
Mhm.
That's the question. And this is Kelly Day's sister.
Okay, yeah, I know her. Yeah, I think, yes, she's exactly right. So the meat industry, definitely male dominated. And I think I have this on. Yeah, I do have this on. Not that I really need it, but it is a male dominated industry and it's really tough. And I think the guidance I would give to any young woman is be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. And, you know, sometimes you're going to come across, maybe it's, excuse my French, but maybe it's a bitch. But, you know, sometimes how we're perceived might be different than how others are perceived. If a guy's, back in the day, if a guy was given direction, it wasn't any big deal. I was asking him to do something that was a whole different story. However, be persistent, be consistent, and actually don't be afraid to put yourself out there. The glass ceiling can be broken. It really can. And, you know, you have to be willing to be that first person jumping off the telephone pole. We had a team building experience at a ropes course. And I tell you what, most of the guys were afraid of heights. And so I was the first one up that telephone pole and jumped right on off. So I think it's important to be confident in yourself. Find mentors. Find people that you can associate with that are going to give you that encouragement and that strength to endure. I didn't have that really back then in the day because what I did work with is a lot of guys, but there's a lot of amazing women in industry right now, whether it happens to be the manufacturing industry or right here at K-State. So actually look for a mentor to help you through. So hopefully it helps you out. Thanks, Carrie.
Oh, they're asking a question.
The convenience store or wherever, met up with the group of ranching guys and getting the conversation with a bunch of guys sitting down, just having a good old boys talk. How in the world did you get?
Well, you know me, I'm pretty bashful. And so I went into the convenience store and I got my drink and I sat down. All right, I looked over there and it was actually somebody I'd known from church. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna belly up to the bar and sit down and have a conversation with them. And so that's what I did. And that's kind of how the conversation started going. And I listened for quite a while, as long as I could, but you know me. I listened as long as I could before the conversation. I had to get involved. I just couldn't wait any longer because, yeah, I don't know. I guess I've always just, I grew up with number 6 of 7 kids. You got to be pretty bold. And so I guess that's why. I don't know. I don't, I think it's all these things that have happened throughout my life. I worked in a meat industry with a whole bunch of guys, so they didn't scare me. They didn't intimidate me. And I just like people. So I have a tendency to be drawn to people and start a conversation. I think you guys probably know, many of you guys know, I don't think I've ever met a stranger. And they're probably looking at me saying, I've never met anyone stranger than you, Linda. But yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. Anything else? Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate your attention. And I hope that you know a little bit more about me now. So thank you. Have a great day. And thanks for what you do, everybody. Thanks everybody for what you do.
Thank you, Linda. And we will have 2 more What Matters to Me and Why lectures in the spring. So look out for announcements for those and enjoy the rest of your week.